in the school sector. So came across, we're really fortunate here in Colorado that we have a vehicle called Charter Schools, and that allows a group of parents to propose a program and put it forward to be able to have a program that's autonomous, but while it's also publicly funded. So we had some friends over at Liberty Common up in, in the neighborhood up in Fort Collins. And we also were well aware of Ridgeview Classical Academy in Fort Collins as well. Actually, it's interesting that all of this started with a group of us parents going up and visiting both of those schools. And again, that was about 7 years ago at this point. And we just noticed going into both schools that there was something really unique about the energy of the programs, the enthusiasm of the teachers, the enthusiasm and engagement of the kids. And it was just obvious to us that what we didn't know we were missing, but we knew we were missing something, we saw in those schools up in Fort Collins. So we came back down to Jefferson County, talked about what do we want to do, and we actually contacted both schools years ago and said, we'd love to have your help building programs like what you guys have in our community. And I think we got a good chuckle out of both. They were very flattered, said, thank you for the compliment. We're really just focused on what we're doing and doing it well, but we're glad to help any way we can. So not to be outdone, we just kind of continued thinking about these ideas of putting together a great school. And then we partnered with an organization that was just starting to support classical schools. It's a program called the Barney Charter School Initiative out of Hillsdale College. And so we partnered with them, and they helped us put together our first classical school, Golden View Classical Academy. And it's really interesting. If you're around our community for a while, we love to talk about just kind of coming full circle that the Hillsdale model was actually built initially off of Ridgeview Classical, which is self-spun off of Liberty Common. So it's really interesting to see the DNA of a program like ours kind of originating in the Fort Collins community. So with that, I'm going to share my screen here as well, and just to present some slides, and then we'll go from there. All right, great. Well, I've already done a little bit of an intro. So I'd like to start off and talk about what is a charter public school. So I think it's important just to have an understanding of what charter schools are. And I talked a little bit about what it allows us to do as we built our first schools. But charter schools are tuition-free public schools. We are not-for-profit organizations. We admit children by lottery, so we're not selective. We don't screen children and pick the best students that we want to educate. So we do a lottery process. At this point in the year, in our enrollment process for next year, we've already run our lottery, and we're now admitting children on a first come, first served basis. We're also bound by laws on transparency and accountability, just like other government institutions and schools are in our community. Charter schools do accept students with special needs, and Mr. Kramer is going to talk hopefully a little bit about one of his really exciting hires, about his student services director, who we already have on the team for next year. What makes a charter school unique is that, and able to operate the way they do, is that charter schools obtain waivers from various state laws and policies. And those are primarily around operations, our ability to determine our own curriculum, and our ability to staff our program as we see fit. And when we talk about staffing, we do hire highly qualified subject matter experts who are really excited about classical education and that we know are going to love working with your children. We don't require state certification at our schools, and we don't necessarily have it as a preference either. And we will acknowledge as well, charter schools aren't the right choice for everybody. There are a lot of great choices out there, and district-run schools and district-run programs, but I think what we're offering in the setting of classical education is typically offered in the charter school communities in Colorado. So what are we doing? You can imagine with a name like a classical academy that what we're doing is not innovative. What we're doing is we're replicating existing and high quality school models that are already working educating kids in Colorado. If you look at some of the top high school, top programs in the state of Colorado, and these are typically published on things like greatschools.com and a number of other publications, you'll notice that some of the highest performing, many of the highest performing schools in the state of Colorado are classical and or liberal arts schools. So, and I've already mentioned our school, our program is most closely aligned to what you'll find at Golden View Classical Academy or our sister school, Ascent Classical Academy of Douglas County in Lone Tree. So me as a parent, when I talked about just looking around and finding the right fit for what I wanted for my children when my oldest was very young, I think what concerned us and concerns a lot of families that we talk to is really the idea and the philosophy behind the school and our role as parents. I had seen a number of schools that really took the approach that they're the experts. Parents don't really know what they're doing. And we still see that a lot today. And the expectation that just drop your kids off with us, don't ask questions. We don't really want to see you in the classroom unless we have something we really need from you. But just trust us, we'll take care of it. So when we look to start establishing Golden View and our current schools, this school, we really take the perspective that it's the right and responsibility of parents to direct the education upbringing of their children. So we think that's really important, that it's really the responsibility of parents. And again, we're offering and want to team up with parents, but still recognizing it's still your responsibility to provide for the education of your children. So I think that those ways of thinking are really important in how we approach our relationship with you as a family, you and your family. So we're really excited. We have a great headmaster to lead the opening of this program. I'm going to allow him to introduce himself. I'll just a couple of key points. Mr. Trent Kramer was previously with Benjamin Franklin Charter School in Arizona, and he's a graduate of Hillsdale College. And hopefully he'll talk about a little bit of his background coming into Hillsdale, not really knowing what classical education is, and his formation into classical education. So with that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Mr. Kramer.
Thanks, Derek. I really appreciate it. Like Derek said, I was a graduate of Hillsdale College. I kind of say it's a lucky accident that I fell into going to Hillsdale College because I knew very little about what it was, what classical education was. And my background was in a traditional district school, K through 12. And I did not see the value that the school setting really gave me. I played sports, I liked the social element of it, and I did okay in school, but I didn't see the value in it. And I ended up going to this college, and after my freshman year, I almost quit. It was hard. I didn't know why these people were asking me to read these really old books that were really difficult to understand, and I didn't see the value there either. But by the end of my freshman year, I started to see the value in some other people's lives that this type of education was giving to them. And I also just saw my professors and some of my friends that were a little bit older in the program that were absolutely loving not only to seek into these things that they were talking about in their classes, but their lives seemed to be happier because of it. And at that point in time, I didn't know what it was that was happening, but I knew I wanted it. And so I stuck around, and I was very happy that I did because it changed the entire trajectory of my life. I started seeking after and serving things that were greater than myself. I started trying to serve the communities that I was living in rather than living for the moment and just running after these very momentary pleasures, but finding things that were much more worth my time and my energies and efforts. And I really, really started to see the value that classical education can have in my own life and my friends' lives. And because of that legacy that I was gifted, I believed that I needed to go and extend that legacy to others as well. And my hope was that I could start to share this joy that I had gained in my life from education to students that were like I was when I was in school. I wish someone would have exposed to me this type of education when I was in kindergarten or first grade, rather than my freshman year of college. And so that's what got me into teaching, and through many means of growth. And I had a great mentor and headmaster there. And he helped me grow into a great teacher. And then asked me to pursue leadership roles in a master's and in administration so that I could start to train and teach teachers. And I started to do that. And that led me into seeking more school leadership later on. And through some great means, I ended up meeting Derek, and he started telling me about the Ascent Classical Academies. And I really just fell in love with the group of people that lead these schools, that the teachers that are there, the families that have started these schools. And so very, very excited to be a part of that, and really excited to dive into to this new learning community in Fort Collins and the Windsor area. Really just excited to join with that group. So let's talk a little bit about education and classical education and what our program might look like. So we spend an immense amount of money every year as a community on education. And there's a lot of questions of what is this for, right? What are we spending all this funds for? Getting kids prepared for college or career? And that's where most people stop. And what I would say to that is that those are good things. A career is a good thing. Going to college is a good thing. But if this is all that we offer to our students, I feel that we offer them too little. These things should be a happy consequence of a good education, not the focus of an education. And so what we want to do is we want to create good human beings who are prepared to live good lives. It seems very abstract, and we'll hope to talk a little bit more about what that looks in a little bit. But just know that we're not focused on being just college ready or career ready. We want them to be ready to live a good life. And those things like college entrance and careers are going to be happy consequences of those who seek a good education. And they shouldn't be the focus, because otherwise we offer too little to our students. So what is the purpose of education? What do we view that as? So one of the big things that you'll hear a lot in the Ascent communities is that we are trying to initiate our students into a tradition and a cultural heritage. So you look especially at the Western world that has developed much of our American culture. There's these great thinkers and great authors, just to name a couple of them that are really big highlights in our curriculum. You have thinkers like Plato and Aristotle and Cicero and Aquinas. Even the founders themselves were very focused on this idea of this cultural heritage. And E.D. Hirsch is someone that we hold up very highly because of him being one of these great thinkers in American culture that really helped develop this core knowledge curriculum that you'll hear us talk about a little bit later. But there's this idea that there is a certain amount of information that everyone within our community, within our country, should know as a citizen of this country. And that idea of taking part in this great conversation that allows them to access this cultural heritage that's being passed down to them. And so through those things, we develop the child's intellectual and moral powers for self-government, the pursuit of happiness. And again, this is done through a content-rich curriculum that's going to expose students to these areas of this cultural heritage. Again, we focus on Western and American heritage primarily. Doesn't mean that they're not exposed to other cultures, but that is the ones that we focus on the most, because that is the culture and the country that they are living in. And the aim of this is to create someone who is a virtuous, knowledgeable, and articulate person that can use these abilities within their own communities to better their own community and their own country. But we also see being educated as not just worth this idea of perpetuating our civilization, but it's just worthy for its own sake. You'll hear this term thrown around a lot, that we want to learn for the sake of learning and not to just get into college or just pass a state exam. But we want to teach students that being educated is worthy in its own sake. And it's not just something we should do to pursue other ends. It can be an end in and of itself. So let's look at some of an overview, a little bit about some of these big terms that will pop up that you might be familiar with, maybe you aren't. So the term classical is one that is thrown around a lot. The idea of a classical education is the use of great books and teachings of history to inspire wonder and a love of learning. And we do focus a lot on the teaching of wisdom and virtue to the pursuit of the good, the true, and the beautiful. So kind of three big terms that are brought up in classical education a lot. But this idea is that through wonder and a love of learning, you can seek these things that are higher and greater than just our immediate passions that so many of our students, but also ourselves, have this tendency towards. And so to live a good life and to pursue happiness, you need to be pursuing these greater things and not just the moment. Core knowledge, this is a proven content-rich, integrated, and spiraled approach to a K through 8 education. This type of philosophy, especially the idea of a content-rich and integrated and spiraled approach, does carry into the high school as well. But this idea of teaching students something worth knowing, and that it's not just teaching them skills to pass a particular narrow test, but we want them to be integrated into this cultural heritage that we talked about earlier. And so you need a good curriculum that can stand up to that. We are a liberal arts and sciences school, and so our content is rich with the sciences and the liberal arts. The interesting thing about that is I find that term to be a little redundant, but we feel like we have to say it because the liberal arts do not exclude the hard sciences, mathematics, and the like. That's all a part of that, but so many people, when they say liberal arts, they exclude the sciences and mathematics, and they only focus on history and English and the humanities types classes. And so we do include the sciences in our classes. This is a focus. The students don't need to only study themselves in humanity. They also need to study the world around them that they are living in if they're truly going to have a good understanding of who they are and where they are. And all of these focuses, art, music, science, math, any of these things that we're getting into, we're not focused purely on training them for particular vocations. We believe that there's going to be time enough in the future for them to choose a vocation, but there are things that we believe that all of them need to know to be well-rounded human beings. And so there is not a focus on the utility of a class, but more is something worth seeking after in and of itself. And we do expose them to the Western and American traditions. And the reason being that we focus on those is that this is the culture that they are living in. America was founding in its politics, its philosophy, its religion, its literary heritage. All of these things were really rooted in the Western culture. And so if students are really going to understand the world that they are currently living in this country, they do need to have a very strong understanding of the Western culture that they are in. So what does that look like in the grammar school? Again, I brought up this earlier, but we do use core knowledge as our base curriculum for literature, history, geography, sciences, art, and music. The big piece of this core knowledge that I'm very fond of is its explicit phonics. We do not use a whole word approach to teaching students how to read, but we do focus with explicit phonics. And that we do focus also on correct grammar and spelling. There's a lot of schools right now that are not, they think that holding students accountable to correct spelling and grammar is stifling to their creativity. We do not believe that to be the case. We believe that there is a right way of writing and a right way of spelling words. And so we do teach students that there is a correct way of doing that. We also use cursive handwriting. There's a beauty to cursive handwriting, but there's also so many studies that show that writing, not only just handwriting in general, but cursive handwriting explicitly, is helpful for our students' memory and development within the language. One of the things about a classical education is very important is it is language rich. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in detail a little bit later on, but that writing things out, it's not just speaking that we're language rich, but it's in written form as well as in speaking. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that too. We do focus on the great books and great stories. Students and humans in general learn very, very well when it comes to the use of stories. Had a conversation with one of my teachers I've signed earlier today about some of the stories maybe it would be helpful for him to read in anticipation for teaching students. We learn really, really well with the use of stories, and so that's a really important piece of what we're doing, both stories from history and from literature. We do expose them to Greek and Latin elements within the English language. So while they are learning vocabulary for the English language, they're also learning Latin and Greek roots especially. A large part of the English language is rooted in those ancient languages. And so we want our students to know and have a good, strong understanding of that as well. We do use Singapore math. And so Singapore math is very much so aligns with core knowledge because it is that kind of cyclical going back to previous knowledge to help students not only just have a understanding, but a great mastery of what it is that they're learning, and then they retain it better because they're constantly going back to those touch points. And we do have art, music, and PE. The way our schedule is built right now is that art and music are every other day, and they do have PE every day. And it is a part of our core curriculum because we believe that a student is not just a mind, they are a mind, a body, and a soul. And so we try to make sure that they are as well-rounded as possible. And so they need to be exposed to all of these things. And they're not just something that are taught in a vacuum, but they're taught as a part of a whole as well. I had a conversation with our art teacher that we hired, and she is so excited to show students how much mathematics is involved in the teaching and learning of the use of art. And so our teachers, even in our specialties like art and music and PE, are going to try to integrate that into our curriculum as well, so that students are learning from so many different avenues, but it's a consistent thing throughout.
Yeah, Trent, Derek here. I just want to offer this perspective as a parent who having a second and third grader doing Singapore math. I think one of the really strong aspects of the program is just it's very conceptual. So while the kids learn, they learn the concrete thinking behind something, a pictorial representation, but it also gets them ready for abstract thinking that they're going to encounter up in algebra. So Singapore starts early, getting them thinking in a way that's going to help them be successful with more advanced math. And that's just something I want to share as my input of what I see with my own young children in Singapore.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, so let's look at the grammar school classroom. And what does that look like? So we do have direct instruction. Teachers are leading the class, and they're the primary facilitators of learning. There are so many different types of educational programs now where the teacher is more there to help students access the information from technology or whatever it is. And that's really not the way that we do things. We could talk about technology a little bit later if you guys would like. But we do believe that the teachers have a lot to offer the students as a way of guiding them through the curriculum, but also guiding them to these lessons that we're trying to teach them and to grow in their ways of virtue. Disciplines are not taught in isolation, but it's part of an interconnected learning environment and curriculum. And so to my story from earlier about our art teacher talking about the use of mathematics in her class, we want our students to understand that all of these things are connected in their learning. They don't just say, okay, we are done with mathematics now, let's move on to our literature section. We want our students to see how connected all of this learning is to help bolster their understanding. Okay. The desks are in rows and student face the front. That doesn't mean that our classes are rigid and cold. There is a lot of fun and enjoyment that happens in our class, but it is orderly. One of the things that our classes will be, and you'd be shocked to walk into one of our classes for our second graders or first graders, and they're in lines and rows and they're following with the teacher and they're doing something, and it's very, very impressive to see, but it doesn't mean that it is a somber class just because they are in lines and rows and orderly. The students know our expectations and they meet those, but that doesn't mean that the classes are cold. I also wanted to point out just the idea about that language-focused curriculum here. Learning is accomplished through words, both written and spoken, rather than just passive learning by the use of just pictures and video and television. We're not just going to try to learn about World War II by putting on a World War II documentary. There are times where pictures and short video clips can be a help, but they shouldn't be the primary facilitation of the learning. We should be speaking through these things. We should be writing about these things. And so students are going to learn through that way, because that's how human beings learn best, is through the use of that language that we possess. And the other thing that we have is that our students are in uniform. And this is another one where some of our parents that are on our panel might be helpful to speak about. But our students do wear uniforms. And some of the uniform use is one, is it shows students a proper reverence for themselves and what they are doing in the class. And so they get dressed up a little more than maybe they normally would if they're sitting at home doing online learning, or they're sitting at home on a Saturday morning. So they do dress up a little bit, but that shows this proper reverence that what they're doing is very important. I know there's some stories, and I'm sure Skill Martin and Mr. Schuler will tell you, but stories of some of our students at our other schools that are doing their online learning and they're still getting dressed up in their uniforms because that's the way that they do school. And so it is something that I think even a lot of our families that maybe aren't super fond of uniforms to start really grow an affinity for it because of what it does. And again, we don't just have our students in uniforms because we're a classical school and that's what we do, but there is intentionality behind that decision.
Yeah. Mr. Kramer, and actually that's a pretty funny story, just talking about the sense of unity and pride that our kids have with their uniforms. I know my second grader had her final science presentation today, and it was a Zoom presentation. So the kids were getting on Zoom and doing a presentation, like, and a bunch of the kids were dressed up. My daughter went and got her school uniform on. She was really excited to be able to wear it. So there is a great sense of camaraderie around the school uniform as well.
Good, thank you. All right, so we are starting as a K through 6 this school year, but we will be growing over the next several years to a K through 12 program. And a lot of the things that we do in the K through 6 program will extend into the junior and senior high. They will look a little different as the students grow. Some of the things that they do will need to grow as well. But we do core knowledge all the way through 8th grade. There is a focus a little bit on that classical literature, using not only those stories from the time, but also primary source documents from that time as well. And we do try to line up, especially in our humanities section, we try to line up what they're doing in their English classes with what they're doing in their history classes. And so if they're reading classical literature from the Greek era, and they're reading, Homer, and they're doing the Iliad, they're also going to be learning about the Homeric Greeks and reading some of their primary sources that we might have from there. Not very much from the Homeric era, but when they get into those areas and they line them up, those classes almost seem like they work in conjunction with one another, and our students are fooled and think, oh, I feel like I have this class twice during the day. And that's a really good thing. And our students learn and kind of get a double dose of these things as they go through there. And we're not just going to read a textbook that talks about the Greeks. We want to read about what the Greeks said about themselves, and as much as we possibly can. And we do use heavily Socratic discussion. That'll be introduced in the grammar school time, but is heavily used once you get north of that 6th grade class, because of the development of those students. And so that Socratic discussion is very, very important. And I could talk for hours on that, so I won't, but just that idea of that interplay between student and teacher and student helps those students tap into that language rich component of our curriculum. And that dialogue is very, very important. Logic and classical composition and rhetoric are also going to be emphasized at these grade levels, and that Socratic discussion plays a hard role into that. We do have 3 semesters of American history and government and free market economics, so that is something that's a little bit unique to our program and what we are doing. We do have fine arts for music and art in the core academic program, and so our students are going to continue to be exposed to that after the grammar school section as well. Latin is going to be required 7th through 9th. They do, like I said, in the grammar school have those Latin and Greek roots, but we're actually going to have official classes where they're full classes in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, where they will be required to take those. And then they can continue in Latin in the 10th through 12th grade, or they can shift to another foreign language. What those foreign languages will be, I always get this question, what those foreign languages will be really determined on what students desire to take and what we have the ability to teach. But I'd love to see a robust language program in our high school. We also have something that is called the See You Succeed program, where our students can actually get direct college credit. As long as one of our teachers has a master's degree, students can earn college credit while being in one of our classes with our teachers and using our curriculum. And so it's something that's kind of unique for those students that are wanting to go to college. They can receive college credit without us having to change our curriculum at all. We just need a teacher that has a master's degree, which many of our teachers will. And then one of the things that's really important about a classical education, and it really hits home once you get into that kind of 7th through 12th section, is we really want to teach students how to think. And note that is not, we don't want to teach them what to think. We want to teach them how to think. This isn't just telling them this is how you must think because this is right, but we want to teach them to become thinkers themselves and how they can process information for themselves. And that's very, very important for us. So the next thing we're going to talk about a little bit is we do have these core virtues that we point to a lot with everything that we do. So these core virtues that you see in front of you, as well as principles of self-government and civility, are identified and clearly taught in a seamless manner throughout the course content. And so this isn't just something where we have a virtue of the month and we talk about it once at a assembly and then the students never hear it talked about again. But all of these 7 very Aristotelian core virtues are taught seamlessly throughout the curriculum. and they're something that our teachers are going to be taught to have conversations with our students about on a regular basis. Again, the idea here is that we're not just trying to create students that have really good minds that can think very well, but we want them to be good human beings. And not just people who are able to complete a task or train for a particular vocation, but we want them to be good human beings. And we feel like these core virtues really help us focus some of those areas as far as teaching virtue to our students. One of my favorite virtues on this list is actually the virtue of responsibility. And there are many philosophers and thinkers over the years have tried their hand on what a responsible person looks like. That's really going to be played into how we teach students their kind of civil responsibility, which I'll talk about on the next slide. But the other one that's a unique one that very few people see is friendship. And the philosopher and statesman Cicero described friendship as two people pursuing a good life together. And those are kind of the conversations we'd have with our students. We don't want your friendships to simply just be, oh, we have similar interests, so let's spend time with each other. But we are two people who are both seeking to live good lives, and how can we help do that together, both holding each other accountable and pushing each other to be better. And so that's a really unique virtue that I don't think you'd see on a lot of lists, but I'm very, very happy it's there, especially at these younger students as they're learning what does it look like to be a good friend versus, just, hey, that kid has a cool lunchbox, I'm going to hang out with him. And so that's really good that we get to have those conversations with our students based on those core virtues. So to that piece about responsibility, let's talk a little bit about, we call ourselves an American classical education. And on that next slide, you'll see kind of some pictures and some focus on that. There we go. So what do we mean by an American classical education? I love telling this story because I think it's helpful. Many classical schools are going to hold up the Greeks and the Romans as being these great cultures and civilizations with these great ideals. And that's great. And we should use them as an opportunity to learn and focus on what is good and what our civilization should be like. But we're not trying to train up good Romans or good Greeks. We are trying to train up good Americans who live in this American society and can help develop it. So there is this deep study and understanding of the philosophy and history behind this republic that we live in. And we are trying to show students to be very patriotic and respectful of their country, driving them to be responsible citizens themselves. And one of the things that I think is important to note is that America is an exceptional place because of some of the great ideals that it put forward into the world, really in at least in a synthesized format, for this idea that all humanity have these rights. And our country has done a really good job of opening up freedoms to every person, but some of these things are not fully actualized yet. And so we want to push our students to continue to pursue those great ideals that this country was founded on until they are hopefully someday fully actualized in our country. And so there is this legacy that they've been gifted as being born in this country, that they need to not only defend the great lengths towards liberty and freedom that they've been given by living here, but also they need to continue it and hopefully advance that pursuit as well. And so that legacy they have, they can then defend it and pass it on to the next generation as well. And so that's something that's really important, I think, for us to note, is that we are patriotic. We want our students to love where they're living and love where they're from, but also acknowledge maybe some of the areas that maybe America has not done so well in the past, and maybe isn't doing so well now, and hopefully they can work towards bettering this country that they live in, and at minimum the communities that they live in within this country. The next slide, this is the slide that I love talking about, because this has been most of my job since I've come on staff, and that's hiring a staff that is highly qualified to be in a room for the immense amount of hours that they're going to be with your children. We do a couple just details that are on the slide, and then I'll talk a little bit about what I'm looking for particularly. We are looking for content experts rather than simply looking for someone who holds a license. This is typical in charter schools because it does open us up to a lot of great people and a lot of great teachers that are very qualified to teach, but they don't have a particular licensure. And I know Mr. Schuler might want to chime in to tell a story that he really likes telling here. But just know that our students are going to be highly qualified with degrees in their field, even if they don't have that licensure. So Mr. Schuler, if you want to tell that story, it's a good time.
Yeah, I know, Bob Schaefer at Liberty Common has his own great stories about people he's had come in and able to teach at his school who aren't qualified to teach at other neighborhood schools. But even at Golden View, we've seen just the benefit of having highly qualified staff who have experience in their field. I just think of several examples, but one in particular is our one of our science teachers at Golden View. She's not qualified to teach at a district school, a middle school, elementary school, much less a high school. But we have her teaching science at our high school. She has 2 degrees in biochemistry from Yale. She's highly qualified, but again, because she isn't licensed and didn't go through an education program, she can't teach at the district school down the street. So having that flexibility of being able to hire content experts and people with advanced degrees and a love of the subject over having to have gone to an education school is really one of the benefits we have as a charter school. So with that, I'll take over the next couple of slides here as we're getting close to the end of our presentation. So I want to talk a little bit about our opening campus. So we've started off our work with this school to be serving kind of the southeast Fort Collins, Windsor, Tinmouth area. And that's where we're still focused on serving. However, just all the growth in that area, a lot of it's still residential, and the commercial growth hasn't caught up to what we've seen in the community. So we're really excited to be partnering with Clearwater Church. It's a little more into central Fort Collins, located at 2700 South LeMay. If you look at the photograph up here, that whole right side of this building was actually built as a school. So we're not trying to cram into necessarily a church space. This is actually a school space that's co-located with the church. So we're really excited to have that partnership. We do have a 2-year option to be there. So we'll definitely be opening up there this first year. And we're still working really hard to be able to find our long-term home back down closer into the Windsor area. So, and again, since it's not where we've initially been looking, we have made provisions for this to be able to buy a bus. So we will be running a bus service from the Windsor area up into this new campus for next year. So I want to kind of get into a wrap-up slide. This is the time, if you guys have questions, please start typing them into the QA box that we talked about earlier. We only have a couple more slides left, and we'll move into responding to those questions. But I just want to wrap up again what we're doing. Our program as a classical program is really, we talk about virtue. The highest virtue, the most intellectual virtue, is the virtue of wonder. And that's what we're really trying to develop within our kids. And wonder is what has driven science and discovery and a lot of other things that are just really great about our culture. We're also focused on preparing our graduates to flourish in life. Mr. Kramer talked about the importance of college and career, and we all acknowledge those are really important things, but really there's still a higher purpose to why we educate and why we form and develop our children. We teach our kids the importance and the value of the pursuit of the good, the true, and the beautiful. We expose them to great books with great teachers. We provide a proven high-quality academic program with great leadership and staff working with your kids. So next steps. So we're kind of wrapping up here. We have our application process is online. If you visit our website noco.ascentclassical.org, there's a link for to apply. You can go there to apply for a seat online. When you apply for a seat online, they'll also put you on our mailing list. So you'll start getting emails and notifications from us as well. So right now, again, we are offering first come, first serve. We are still accepting seats in all grades. So I invite you to go check out our website. We also have a unique opportunity for what we call founding family status. So we talked about having a lottery. We are legally allowed to allow a priority to families who've been involved in helping the establishment of the school. And right now what that is volunteering 30 volunteer hours or referring 15 children who just complete an application. So we'll work on them and help promote our program and hopefully lead them to know this is the right option for their kids, and hopefully they'll enroll. But just by them completing an application and putting your name in the referral box counts toward founding family status. And on that note, it's important when you complete an application or when you suggest your friends complete an application, there is a place to put, how did you hear about us? Please, if you're filling out for yourself, put how you heard about the program. If you have a friend or a family who's going to be attending our school already, please put their name in the box. And again, when you're talking about our program to other people, please encourage them to include you as how they heard about our program. If that is something you're interested in or you want to volunteer and be involved in helping us be successful, please reach out to Ms. Gilmartin at kgilmartin@ascentclassical.org. This is really important. I think with all the lockdowns and people having to stay at home, it's definitely been more difficult for us to reach out and connect with families. Typically, we're holding these events in person, and it's a lot more, we're able to develop a lot more relationships and connections with family. That definitely more of a challenge right now. So we do need people to be talking about and promoting our program with their friends. If this sounds like the kind of program you want to be involved in and be working in and just be a part of the team, I know Mr. Kramer has been doing a really phenomenal job finding some really great talented people to be involved in what we're doing. But you can go to our website, ascentclassical.org/careers, and learn more about open positions and apply to be a part of our team there. So with that note, I'd like to turn it back over to Ms. Gilmartin. We have some questions coming in. Again, we'd like to invite you to continue submitting questions, and I think we'll probably have a next 20, 30 minutes to go through questions. So I'd like to turn back over to Ms. Gilmartin. So I'm going to end my slides and like to have her take over.
Thank you. All right, we've gotten quite a few questions in here. I've answered just a couple privately, but I'm gonna take some of the top ones. All right, this is a question that we continue to get, and I know it's tough to answer, but it's the question about what's gonna happen next fall. A lot of us don't know. It's a constantly moving target, but they'd like to understand what it is that the goal is of Ascent Classical Academy Northern Colorado. What do we plan to do? How will we adjust to any changes, that sort of thing? Could you answer that, Mr. Kramer?
Mr. Kramer, do you mind if I jump in on this?
You can start and I'll add what I need to.
Yeah, this is actually a question that we're spending a lot of time on right now. Mr. Kramer and I are having a lot of conversations along with our principal at our school down in Douglas County. So we're keenly interested in what's going on with this. Simply put, we don't know right now. We are a school that we are approved and chartered through the state of Colorado, not the local school district. So we are watching and see that a lot of school districts are putting out draft plans that, I mean, frankly, as a parent, they're pretty draconian. Kids going back to school with masks, hybrid learning, no PE, no, being locked and down in their classrooms. It's a concern. I don't think any of us as parents want our kids going to school in that environment. So we are working right now just with CSI and the College Department of Education to make sure that as a charter school, we have the autonomy to make the right calls for our community, for our schools. With that said, we are looking through a number of different options in case, in just the worst case scenarios that we're back to where we are right now with schools. So we're actively working just on a number of things. And I think it's important to acknowledge that really the beauty and benefit of classical education is just that in-classroom experience. And that's just, regardless of what we do, it's never something we can replicate, but we are looking at the ability to deliver this program online if we have to. Not just with Google Classrooms, as many of us have seen as parents have had our kids fall back on this year, but we're looking at some more robust things to be able to deliver a great education. I think Mr. Kramer and I share that whatever a different scenario looks like, we really want to have our kids in for at least several weeks or a month just to really enculturate them into classical education and the why of what we're doing. And so they can develop some relationships with their teachers and their peers as well. So, Mr. Kramer, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would just say is just as a parent, I can see the concern that people have. And I just want you guys to know that, again, ideally your students are in our classroom. The way classical education, I mentioned that language rich approach, there needs to be dialogue. But in the event that we can't, we are making plans for as many different situations as we can. And whatever we do, we want to be very intentional and careful, because we want to make sure whatever we do is the best situation for your kids with the situation that we're given. And so we are making plans, we're making contingencies, and I think that we're spending a lot of time with that. The other thing that I would add is just because of our relationships with our 2 other sister schools, as well as the network of schools with the BCSI that Mr. Schuler brought up, we have a lot of relationship with other schools around the country that are having the same issues that we are. And so we're able to have conversations with those other school leaders and those other teachers to draw on, hey, what's a good idea that you're working on? How can we make this classical model as successful as we can with these circumstances that we're given? And so I think we have a really good support system to help us in that. And we're going to be very intentional to make sure that we're going to continue as much learning as we can. We're going to inspire as much wonder as we can in your students with whatever situation that we're given.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Kramer, I think you sort of touched on this before in your presentation, but the question is, if you're not looking for licensed teachers, what is it that you're actually looking for in a teacher? What are you striving for?
Great. So yeah, I'm spending most of my time right now hiring people, and I'm not saying, hey, what's your license? I want to first and foremost know that they're good human beings. Again, if we're trying to create good human beings in your students, they need to have good models for that, and that's what those teachers need to be. And so I'm trying to gauge what their desires are, why they're getting into teaching. I want to know what their heart is, and I want to make sure that they care for your students, because if they're going to be with your students for 6-7 hours a day, I want to make sure that they're a great example for your kids. I also want to make sure that they love what they're doing. I want to make sure they love pursuing learning themselves, because again, they're a model for that learning. But if they're going to be bored in their job, they're not going to inspire your children. And so I'm looking for those things as well. That's the first step. And so if you want to be a member of my staff, and if you're a parent asking me what am I looking for a teacher, I'm first looking for the type of human being they are. And then I'm going to look at what is their philosophy on education, and what is the purpose of education. I want to make sure it aligns with what we're doing. But then I look for their competency as a teacher and being able to give lessons and things like that, which that stuff does come later. But in my mind, if they are the best instructor that they can be, but they're not a good human being, I don't want them near your children. I really don't. And so those are the things that I'm spending a lot of time, and that takes a long process. None of my teachers that I've hired, I've done one interview with. We've done several conversations. I've had them write up things for me, and I want to make sure that they're a good fit, because I think that a true sign of a great school is what the staff looks like. And so I'm trying to make sure that I'm putting together as good of people as I can that will not only support your students, but support each other. Because I think that if our teachers are really knit together very closely, I think that they're going to improve as well. And so those are some of the big things I'm looking for, even before I get to looking at how would they do in instructing the class. I want to make sure they're good people.
Great, thank you. This is I like this question. For those of you with children at Golden View, what has been your favorite thing to watch your child experience as a result of their classical education? I'll take the first stab at this, Mr. Schuler. So my children, and this is another question that's going to come up, and we'll answer this one in a bit, about coming from a district school into a classical school like this, and all 3 of my children did that. But I would say that what I have appreciated the most is watching my children just absolutely flourish in their knowledge, the rich content that they're learning, something that I never had growing up. When they started, my youngest was in 2nd grade, my oldest was in 6th grade, my middle was in 4th grade, and watching them learn how to write, learn how to write in cursive, practice their handwriting, engage with the teachers, engage with their peers, with the other students in the class. They came from a school that had a lot of technology, iPads, Chromebooks in front of every student, watching them get into a classroom setting where there was discussion going on and they were reading great books and they could have these conversations around the dinner table that were just amazing to me, to see that they were learning this, that they were having these deep conversations, that they were reading the Declaration of Independence and understanding it, understanding world history, talking about what communism was and what happened with Mao. I mean, these are the things that I have absolutely loved about my children going through the classical model. And the other one is my oldest took a rhetoric class last year, and he actually won a competition because he wrote about one of the virtues and what he thought courage was. And I was amazed when I listened to it that he knew how to do that, because I didn't even help him with it. We weren't involved with that at all. So that it's just such a rich environment and so interactive with the teachers and the students. And that's been my favorite thing.
Yeah, like Ms. Gilmartin said, I have younger children, so mine are in the earlier side of the experience. The core knowledge curriculum is just really amazing. It's content rich, and just kind of to hit on one of the questions that's in the queue here, core knowledge is not the same thing as Common Core. Common Core is a set of standards. Core knowledge is, again, a intentional focus on teaching kids actual things and doing it in a sequential and intentional manner. Common Core kind of perverted core knowledge because core knowledge is successful, and they intentionally adapted a play on core knowledge. So I just want to be very clear, it's not the same thing. But with that, our kids are just learning so much interesting things. You talked about wonder being a virtue, and little kids are like sponges. They are just wanting to know things all the time, and they're being fed things. And my wife's a physician, and my third grader comes to the dinner table and talks about the body and cells and replication, and even she's just impressed. I think their interest and just really what they know about history is just really fun to watch. We can take them to national parks, or take them to Washington, D.C., or just take them to a museum, and the things that they know is just really fun to watch. We had the chance to go to a big art museum last year, and just walking through the gallery, the fact they knew some of the paintings and the painters as young children was just really amazing. I think we talked about instilling the sense of love of learning is just obvious in my children. I think they just really are fascinated about the world and what's out there, and just being able to learn more about it. And the reading great literature and great books is just really also developed a good habit of wanting to read, and because they're reading good things and they're good stories. They're reading about heroes and things that a lot of books that kids read about today, they don't, they're more contemporary and don't really talk about heroes and just big things. So I think those are some of the biggest things that I appreciate out of my kids' education at a school like this.
Okay, thank you. The next question is around homework. We get that question a lot. What is the thought philosophy around homework?
Yeah, I can take that one. So we have in our two parents here can probably speak to this a little bit as well, but we do have kind of a general parameters of how long homework should take. It's basically the grade level that you're in plus 10 minutes should be about that nightly homework. Times 10 minutes. Got to get my math figures there correctly. So whatever the grade level they're in times 10 minutes. And that is a general kind of guideline as far as what your student should be doing. So I want to talk about kind of the philosophy of homework, but then I also want to hit on kind of the time and what our viewpoint is on that. Philosophy of homework should be that we should not just be giving our students busy work. We should be giving them work that is meaningful and helpful for them. And it's not just, well, we need them to do something, so let's give them this. It should be something that is helping them advance in their own understanding, whether that is practice, of their math figures, or maybe it's writing a short paragraph for their rhetoric course or whatever it is. We want it to be meaningful to them. And a lot of our homework will will either review what they have done in class, or it will prepare them for the following class that they're going into. So I'm a big proponent of meaningful homework, because I feel like my education, a lot of times the homework I was given was meaningless. And we don't want to just give your students work for the sake of work. That's not what we're doing. And so, we're classical education. These schools have this idea that they're very difficult, and it's almost in some cases where they want to give more homework than the other school to show that they're more difficult than them. That's not at all what a classical school should be doing. The things that we should be doing should be intentional and meaningful. So hopefully that answers that component of it. As far as the timing goes, understand that we do believe that a classical education takes some individual practice and individual work on the student's part. They do need to take an active role in that, and the homework is a piece of that. Now, if a student though is supposed to be getting 60 minutes of homework a night, and they're doing an hour and a half, 2 hours of homework a night, something is wrong there. And there's 3 different sections in my mind that can be wrong. One, they could have been given too much homework. And that's something that we would have to rectify and remedy, and that can happen, but we would want to fix that very quickly. The other alternative is that the student is having a difficult time with the homework, and so we need to bring the teacher in to help them access that information that they're having trouble with. And so we want to make sure that we help those students if they are struggling, that need that help. We don't just say, well, do more homework. We should come alongside them and aid them in that. The other alternative, and this is probably more so for the older kids, but I feel like our students are increasingly at a younger age having cell phones in their hand. Maybe they are doing their homework and saying they're doing 2 hours of homework, but they're really doing 15 minutes of homework, and a lot of the other time spent on their phone, on Twitter or Instagram or whatever the new thing is, TikTok, I think it is. I don't know. My wife knows more about this than I do.
That's it. It's TikTok.
Good. I got it right. I'm not completely a Luddite, but that's not an area I get into too much. And so oftentimes we need to teach students what study skills look like. Don't do your homework in front of the TV. Don't do it in a place where there's a lot of business around them. And so sometimes we just need to explain to students how they should be doing their homework. And some of that's training and help getting you the understanding when with you as parents, so you can help your child at home. But we will do that on our end, as well as making sure to help students when they're having those struggles, to make sure they know where is a good place to do homework. Maybe putting the cell phone in the other room and not texting your friends while you're doing homework, to make sure that you can get it done at an appropriate time.
All right, thank you. And that leads into the next question, well, and that I will go ahead and take a stab at, Mr. Kramer, which is, we have a number of children that are going to be entering our school or thinking about it from their neighborhood district schools, and parents that are concerned that they might not be able to keep up or adjust well. How does the transition work? I can speak to this personally because my children were all in the district school, our neighborhood school, before they entered classical. I didn't even know what classical education was at that time, and when I learned all about it, I thought this is going to be quite a challenge. But I can tell you that they really do rise to the occasion. That children can do that, and it's just a little bit of an adjustment in the beginning. One of the great things about being a part of a founding school and being in that first year is that everybody's starting new. When we opened Golden View Classical Academy, we had children coming from 120 different schools. And we had all kinds of backgrounds, private, homeschool, lots of district neighborhood schools. And so everybody was starting new in different grades, and the teachers knew that, and they worked with the students. They worked on, working on those executive functioning skills. So one of the things my children had to learn was, all right, there are expectations of me now. I have homework. I've got to make sure that in my planner, I'm writing down what it is that I need to be doing every night. I need to set aside this time. I need to make sure that I'm not doing other things. I'm not distracted. I do have grades, but we have a wonderful system, Power Schools, what we use, and the kids and the parents can constantly check in and see what's happening. I also was able to always reach my children's teachers and talk to them about something. If I'm one of those parents who really wants my children to learn to do this on their own, but if I've had to get involved, I've been able to easily get that information. So I will tell you that it's not a huge adjustment, and you will be so thankful and grateful that you gave this opportunity to your children in the long run. Do either one of you want to add to that? We'll go on to the next one. Okay. All right. Let's see, the next one. What is the ideal class size that Ascent is striving toward? What do we think we're going to be in the first year, and then maybe next year's, subsequent years?
Yeah, so the first year is really going to depend on enrollment, but I can tell you that we're looking right around 30, maybe 32 at the largest at those grammar stage classrooms. The way that we do education and having those expectations and keeping the room orderly and things like that, it does make it very easy to have students receive a good education, even with a number like 30 or 32 in a classroom. What I will say is that as the school grows and we get up into those logic and rhetoric stages, or those high school stages of school, there is kind of a natural attrition at a school like this, but usually those classes, we do want to have a lot more Socratic discussion going on, a lot more dialogue between students and between the teacher. And so those class sizes will be a little bit smaller naturally. But it really depends a lot on our enrollment. But hopefully that kind of at least gives you an idea of what we're looking for, especially in the first couple of years. That number right around 30 is a pretty safe bet about where we would be. I don't want to cram 50 kids in a classroom. It's just not helpful for the students or the teachers. So I don't want to do that. But I think we'll be very intentional about the numbers that we're doing that fit our style of education very well.
Okay, thank you. I think this next question is for Mr. Schuler, and this is just from parents wanting to understand what the long-term goal is of the school and where we're going to be located. You did mention in the presentation that we have a 2-year lease on this, but people are wondering, are we going to be moving next year? Where do we ideally plan to be located? Is it in Windsor? Is it west of Windsor? And you know, how are the land negotiations going right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're going to be opening in the church. We have a 1-year lease with a 1-year option, so it's up to 2 years. Again, and part of that is just us finding the ideal location in the southeast part of the county. So since we are a district authorized charter school, we do have to be located in the Poudre School District boundaries. So that is Larimer County. We're not able to open up on the Weld County side of Windsor. With what's going on right now with the economy and funding, we're keeping a really close eye on what's going on in the market. Like I said, we've been looking at some land that we've been looking at, and we're also just keeping our eyes open on other opportunities if there are commercial opportunities that come available. But we are just continuing to watch that pretty closely. So our desire and our hope, we would definitely like to be in our permanent area by year 2. Again, until we have something committed and you have a plan put together and permits, we're unable to say that's for sure, but that is our intent, and we are working really hard to get us back down in that neck of the woods. I can't really talk to anything specific. Again, I did say Poudre School District boundaries and southeast Fort Collins, Windsor area, and that is the area we're looking at.
No, I'm just going to add something to that. I know it's so important. Where I live, we're about 15 miles from Golden View Classical, and it's off of C470. And for me, it can take, you know, in the mornings, if traffic, it can take up to 40 minutes. I will tell you that when I first was looking at this, I thought, there's no way, we were in our neighborhood school, there's no way I'm going to drive that far in the morning, especially when school starts at 7:45. But honestly, it is after I was involved in the school and understood what my kids were learning, I thought, I can't believe I almost made the decision not to send my children to this school, a tuition-free school, because of the drive. So know that, but also know that, and I have a number of people in my neighborhood that we carpool with. You will find people that you'll be able to carpool with. But I want to address the next question, another question that came in, which really goes along well with this. We do have a bus, because we had so many families in Windsor, we do have a bus that's going to be picking up in Windsor, taking to the Fort Collins location. Once we move, that bus will be used for the reverse. So the families that are up in the Fort Collins area and are attending the school, that bus will be available to them to go the opposite way. So just know that we're committed to that. We have a grant for the bus. We're already in the process of getting it. And you guys will have that option. So don't be concerned about transportation because it usually works itself out. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next question, which is, now I lost it now. Oh, yes. So we have a number of people that are asking about special needs, student services. We've talked about our philosophy on licensed teachers, but they would like to understand do we hire licensed special educators and what is our philosophy on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So being state authorizers, we still have to abide by what the state recommends when it comes to special education. Our only hire right now in our special education program or department is our student services director, and she is certified. So we need to see what our enrollment looks like before we start hiring additional staff for that department. I'm hoping that we will. So we will follow the recommendations of the state for what those things look like. And so I can tell you right now that our student services director is certified. The advantage of her is that she is not only certified, but she also fits all of the other models that we were looking for in someone on part of our team. She loves kids. She particularly loves kids who are struggling with a disability or just struggling in classes. And she's very, very excited to be a part of the Ascent community and to be helping those students that need a little bit of accommodations for this type of education. And so very excited to announce her to you guys. I believe we should be getting that out soon, if not already. So I'm very excited. We're going to be starting to post. My staff is working on bios right now and pictures. And so we're going to start posting those and introducing the staff to you guys as well. And the first one we're going to introduce to you is that student services director. And so, my heart for student services is that this type of education, every kid should be able to access. And we really want to make sure that we're helping those students that need a little extra help. But our hope is that we not only just, and Mr. Schuler enjoys talking about this, so I can open the door to him, but there are a lot of programs that try to bring students into student services programs and then keep them there. Our heart would be that we want our students to learn to grow and take some kind of have some independence with their own education if they're able. And so part of our student services program is to help students to learn the skills necessary and to learn to grow on their own if they can, and to eventually not even needing those services anymore. Our hope would not just to be keep students in special education services permanently. That's not our goal. If they need the help, we want to give it to them. We don't want to over-prescribe help. We want to give the appropriate amount of help that those students need based on their particular thing. And if you guys, anyone in the participants tonight have a specific question about their child, instead of me talking about that with everybody, I'd love for you to reach out to me directly and we can have that conversation.
Mr. Kramer, there's a related question about not just student services, but how do we handle the development of English language learning? Can you talk a little bit about our approach to phonics and how our program's inherently built to support that?
Yeah, so one of the great things about our phonics program is that it's a program that was originally developed to help second language learners and those who had disabilities and needed extra accommodations. And so our program that we use for all of our students fits really well into that, because even the students that have difficulty accessing that language, again, if they need some accommodations because of something specific, we want to give them that. But the nature of the curriculum that we use was actually designed for those students that needed that extra scaffolding. And so it works really well for those who maybe wouldn't need that scaffolding, but it helps them really understand the language. However, for those that need that extra help, we're already using something that was originally intended as a way of remediation. And so those students that need that remediation in a normal setting are already getting a program that fits that really, really well. And one of the things I would point out too is just the idea that all of our staff is looking to help support your students. I will tell you that, again, in other environments, there's this idea that if a student is struggling and I'm a general education teacher, that's someone else's problem. And that breaks my heart a little bit. all of us that are in the classroom should love the kids that we have in front of us, especially those that need us. The student that's going to be really, really successful is probably going to be really successful whether they have a good teacher or not. Those good teachers that are getting into it should be wanting to help those students that need that extra help. And so just as a point to anyone that has a student coming to our place, our teachers that I'm hiring are wanting to be there to help your students. They don't just want to talk about the curriculum and then walk out the door. They care about your students. And that's a very, very important thing to me as I look for a staff. So hopefully that helps answer maybe some other questions that are out there. But Derek, if there's anything you'd like to add there, you're more than welcome.
Okay, this is a couple of questions that have come in about school hours, and I can answer this too, and our school calendar. Do we follow the same school calendar as the districts? Well, we will follow a similar calendar as it relates to Thanksgiving, Christmas, spring break, as the Poudre School District. However, our school starts August 31st, so we're a little bit later than the rest of the schools. We end before Memorial Day. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Mr. Schuler, but we just have a little bit of a different calendar, but we do follow the major holidays. And then our school will most likely start, we haven't announced the hours yet, but most will likely will start at 8 a.m. and end at 3 p.m. And we will make that announcement soon. Did I miss anything there?
I think that's roughly right. All the major holidays, again, we do a full week Thanksgiving of 2 weeks for Christmas. Our spring break is the same as PSD spring break, but we do have some long weekends and some other things in there that aren't the same. But our calendar will be published soon. We just approved it at our board meeting on Tuesday, so that will be available on our website shortly.
Thank you. And we've talked about our approach to technology, that we are a low-tech school. We don't have iPads and Chromebooks in front of everybody. But one person is asking, is technology integrated into the classroom in any way? Could you answer that, Mr. Kramer?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Counter to popular belief, classical education schools are not completely anti-technology. At least we are not. What I would say is my take on technology is that two things. One, technology should not be the primary driver of the education happening in the classroom. When that happens, what you typically see is you see passive learning going on, which I would argue isn't true learning. We need the students to be the primary motivators of that education. And so the teachers are driving the class, but the students need to be active in that process. And when we put a laptop or an iPad or something in front of kids where that's the only technology they have, the teacher becomes just a person who shows them how to access information rather than owning information for themselves. Not to mention the fact that there's a great cut down on the language component of the education when you do that. So we don't like one-to-one, and if I have my druthers, we will never be a one-to-one school, and I don't think anyone in our organization would like that either, so I think we're good there. But we're not anti-technology. My stance on technology is this: technology is a tool. And it can be used really, really well, and it can be used to the detriment of whatever you're doing. And so my mindset whenever a technology is going to be used is, okay, what problem is this going to solve? And are there any other problems that this is going to bring up because we're putting this in there? So one of the things that again, I'm never going to like to have in my classroom ever is cell phones. I think cell phones, there's a lot of programs out there and apps that teachers can use to have quizzes or whatever they are. But while you're not doing that quiz, what are the kids doing on their cell phones? It's a massive distraction. And so the negatives by far outweigh the advancements that would bring to your classroom by having cell phones present. And so that's how I would view any type of technology. We do want to have projectors. We want to have document cameras because there's a lot that our teachers can do with those technologies in the classroom. We just aren't going to be having our students interacting with a ton of technology because we think that they're more of a distraction than they are an aid. And so moving forward, as technology grows, and I'm sure there's going to be in the next 5-10 years a great boom in technology again. As things come up, that's the mindset that we're going to take on that. Technology is not evil. We just need to make sure that we are careful and intentional with how we use things. And I think that that's something that is I would point to about the way that we do things is we're trying to be very intentional with how we do things and how we make decisions. We don't just want to make them flippantly, and we don't want to follow trends. We're a classical school, so we're not following trends in curriculum. We don't want to just follow the newest fad that everyone else is doing. We want to make sure that it's the best thing for your students.
Yeah, and Mr. Kramer, if I can just kind of, I think maybe just a synopsis of that is we make intentional use of good instructional technology that's going to support the teacher presenting something. That doesn't mean videos running a class period, maybe a snippet or displaying a piece of art or listening to a piece of music during a class. But again, we are not a school where you'll find kids on iPads, iPhones, calculators, and lower math, maybe when they're graphing functions in calculus, there's an appropriate use there. But so again, it's a very intentional use of technology, and we really shy away from student use of technology, because if they're on a device, what are they not doing? They're not having a conversation with a teacher. They're not having a conversation with their peers. And that really is the crux of a good liberal arts education, is communicating and exchanging ideas.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. And I'll just add one more thing to that before we wrap up. My children are, all of you know that in technology is intuitive for children. They probably know more than you do on these devices, and they pick it up quickly. My children, I mean, my upper school students, they do their papers on the computer. They do type. They know how to do that. They know how to use the Google Docs and everything else they need to do. But while they're in school, they're engaging with their teachers, they're engaging with their peers, and they're not being distracted by devices. That doesn't mean that the children don't know how to use these things. So rest assured that that will be the case. Now, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up things because we're now an hour and 20 minutes in. If we have not answered any of your questions, I will be answering your questions offline. I have all of them here. And if we haven't answered them, I will definitely get back to you. I want to talk a little bit about what the next steps are. If you haven't yet filled out an application, please go to our website. I'm going to pull up my last screen here and show you. All right, are you able to see that? Derek, are you able to see that?
Yes, we are.
Okay, thank you. So please go to noco.ascentclassical.org, fill out your application. When you fill out your application, we do have seats in every grade, so you will get an offer, and at that point, you will either accept or reject the offer, and then we will have someone reaching out to you soon to finish up the registration documents. You don't need to do that right away, but we're working on that through the month of June, getting the registration documents that we need. If you are interested in founding family status, like Mr. Schuler mentioned in the beginning, you need to reach out to me. My email address is right there, and I can talk to you about the different volunteer opportunities we have. But really right now, what we're looking for is word of mouth, spreading the word. Because of the lockdown, we're not able to do all of the outreach that we normally do. And so we really are depending on our families to let other families know about it. And we are going to be continuing to post the next webinar. I believe the next webinar we're going to do is June 3rd, but we're working hard to try to get some in-person meeting up there in June. As soon as we find out whether those lockdown measures are going to be lifted a little bit, we will work to put something together, even if it's outside on the lawn at the Clearwater Church, which is huge. It's a huge lawn. We'll do that, and we'll have everybody get together. We'll be working on getting some in-person events going. But in the meantime, please continue to share our website, share these webinars. Please share our Facebook page, and we ask people to post it on Nextdoor, to post it on Facebook, to share it with your neighbors and your friends in your neighborhoods. We're going to be working on some yard signs soon. If you'd like to put a yard sign up, you could do that. Just reach out to me. But we really hope to be able to meet all of you soon. And I'm sorry that we're not able to give you a tour to let you see exactly what it looks like. But if you do want to see the inside of the church, go onto our Facebook page, and you'll be able to see some videos that we've done, some pictures, and that gives you a good idea of it. Is there anything that you'd like to add, Mr. Schuler or Mr. Kramer, before we wrap things up?
No, I appreciate everybody taking the time to come learn more about our program. Meet Mr. Kramer. Again, we're really excited to have Mr. Kramer on the team leading the school next year. As we've been working with him, I think he's put together just a really great staff of some really great teachers for next year. And we're really excited. And again, if you haven't had a chance to sign up already, please visit our website, submit an application. if you're interested in being involved in our program, reach out to Miss Gilmartin, and she will absolutely be glad to help direct your energy and help supporting the success of the school. But thank you again for your time tonight.
Yeah, and it was very good for me to meet you and get to speak with you, even if it's through this means. But really looking forward to getting on the ground in Fort Collins, and hopefully we get to do an in-person one in June where I can meet you in person. And just thank you for taking the time to find out more about our school. If you have any questions, my email's on there as well. Feel free to reach out to me, especially if it's a particular question about your student, and I'd be happy to start to get to know you in any capacity that I can right now. But thank you guys for your time. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Have a good evening.